Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I am Taylor Rockwell. Coming up on today's show, we've got MLS Soccer's Matt Doyle on the line to discuss the end of the MLS regular season, the start of the playoffs, and what's going on with Darlington Nagbe. A little bit of Didier Drogba talk in there too. Later on, there's also an emergency call with Daryl Grove, who took time out of his vacation to discuss the then breaking news that Wolverhampton, Daryl's preferred club, had fired manager Walter Zenga. We talk about the situation there and possible candidates to replace Zenga. Big Sam, we are looking in your direction. But first, and without further ado, here's Matt Doyle. On the line with me now, I've got Matt Doyle, Armchair Analyst for MLSsoccer.com. You can find him on Twitter at Matt. I'll let you do that one.
At MLS Analyst on Twitter.
I got to get you in there somehow. Matt, thank you for joining me today. I do appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And I'm sure this is your busy season now, right? I mean, not that MLS regular season isn't keeping you on your toes, but I feel like decision day, playoffs, there's the team's not making the playoffs. There's lots to be done, lots to talk about.
Yeah, I had a cross-country flight and a 4-hour delay thrown in there yesterday for good measure. But yeah, this is generally our busiest day or our busiest week of the season. And so, I could sleep next Monday. It's fine.
That's good. Well, I would say the biggest news coming out of Decision Day, aside from FC Dallas winning the Supporter Shield, was Portland not making the playoffs. So for people who are unaware, can you kind of catch us up on what's happened there? How do you go from being a championship team to not making the playoffs?
Well, last year, remember, in the start of October, they were in danger of missing the playoffs. And then Caleb Porter pulled the right lever and made the right tactical adjustment, and they got hot. And then they became, a month and a half later, MLS Cup champions. The year before that, start of October, Portland were below the red line. And they made the right tactical adjustment and got hot, but a little bit too late, and they missed the playoffs by 1 point. And this year, once again, October, below the red line. Tactical adjustment was made, and this time it was not the right one. And that's how you get a team that really has more top-end talent than most others in MLS, unable to even come close to defending their title. They've got some stuff to figure out in terms of building that roster. They have to figure out at some point that it's probably not worth spending so much of the salary cap on immobile, over-the-hill center backs. They have to figure out how to get wing players who can play on both sides of the ball. They have to figure out how to actually get value out of the draft, because Portland's only ever had one successful draft pick, and that's Darlington Nagbe, and that was 5 or 6 years ago. Look at FC Dallas. Their center defense came from the draft. And I'd argue it's the best center defense in the league. And if you want to argue that it's not, well, and that Colorado's the best center defense, well, where did Axel Schuberg and Jared Watts come from? The draft. So, they've done themselves a disservice in terms of building the club because they are so down on local domestic talent. They just don't seem to believe in U.S. or Canadian players, and it's killing them because they don't have, without that core, never going to build the season-long consistency you need to not find yourself in a fight for your playoff life come October. And when you do that enough, when you get into those fights enough, eventually you lose one or two, and that is decidedly what happened up in Vancouver.
Are those sirens in the background coming for you or additional Portland players?
I think they're going to skip past me, but it's a pretty long drive to Portland.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to make it in time for whatever is happening there. No, I mean that just put it the arrests of Liam Ridgewell and Jake Gleason just put a cherry on top of maybe one of the worst weeks in Portland Timbers history, maybe the very worst, between not getting it done against Saprissa, not getting it done to make the playoffs, losing. If they had just lost by 2, they wouldn't have lost the Cascadia Cup, but they lost by 3, so they lost that as well. And then the idiocy last night from those two guys getting DUIs. I mean, look, you literally have an app to avoid getting DUIs. If you are a human being leaving a bar, just just leave your car overnight, man. Open your Lyft account and just get a ride. You can afford it. And I mean, they're lucky they only got arrested, and we all know the story. So.
Is it Lyft up there? See, maybe that's the problem. Maybe they were trying to use Uber and they just couldn't get that working.
I choose not to use Uber for various reasons. So
that's fair. I know there are other teams in Major League Soccer to talk about, but I did want to ask one more about Portland. What do you make of the situation with Darlington Nagbe, both at club level, given that he, I guess, maybe wanted to stay with the club during the international break for family reasons, maybe because he wanted to focus on that playoff run that hasn't happened. What do you make of that overall U.S. Men's national team drama and Darlington Nagbe?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of sources who are close to the kid, and he didn't, it seems like he didn't really like the way Klinsmann used him. He felt he didn't get any sort of tactical feedback from Klinsmann in terms of what to do, like where even he was supposed to be playing on the field, what his assignments were, where you want to squeeze, what the triggers are for counter pressing, all that sort of thing. And everything was just, you got to be more athletic. You got to be more physical. And I think that just led to a little bit of frustration. I mean, look, I don't know anybody in the world who would look at Darlington Nagbe and say, what this guy needs more of is athleticism.
Yeah.
He needs more coaching. And I don't think he was getting it. And for whatever reason, the way he's wired, that was enough, I guess, for him to say, nah, you know what? I don't need to be a part of this. And it's disappointing because he does have all the talent in the world. But it looks like as long as Klinsmann's the guy, it's looked like he's not going to show it in red, white, and blue.
Man, we are off to just a happy, optimistic start. Let's move on to happier topics. Let's talk about teams that did make the playoffs. So we've got TFC Philly, DC Montreal, Galaxy, RSL, and Seattle Sporting KC. What would you say are the biggest narratives or things people should be looking for heading into each of those knockout games?
Oof. Well, I think the four home teams are the four clear favorites. And historically speaking, it's very tough to go on the road and get a win in these knockout round games. I mean, obviously, Toronto FC getting Jovinko back and healthy in these last two games, they have looked really good going forward. I think you focus on that, but you also have to be aware a little bit of the right side of that defense, who will, that'll be lined up against Chris Pontius. They have been shaky over the last 2 months or so. The LA RSL game, man, RSL has 2 goals in 7 games.
Not ideal.
No, it's not ideal. And whereas, LA, they rested a bunch of guys. I was a little bit surprised by that, even though Bruce Arena told us it was going to happen. I think LA, when they're only playing defense this year, have been a pretty good defensive team. And when they're only going on attack, they're a pretty good attacking team. It's when they try to do half and half, they're bad at both. So I think LA still need to get a rhythm, figure out what they really are. Which is not something you associate with a Bruce Arena team.
No,
right?
It really isn't. And you also don't associate him with cuddling with a puppy in the hallways, and yet everything's been happening these past couple of weeks.
I missed that one, but I'm going to take your word for it.
Oh, it's pretty amazing. I think Daryl was the one who found that and stared at it for 10 minutes of what is happening there? Yeah, it's just Arena sitting on the ground cuddling with an adorable dog. There you go.
Teddy bear.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 games, I mean, I think over the second half of the season, DC United was one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the league, and I'm curious to see whether that can keep going. Though I think for the wider point of view in that game, the question is, will Drogba show up, and will he play? Because I think if Montreal can bring Didier Drogba off the bench for 20-25 minutes. That is such a weapon and such a game changer. Yeah. And he's the best big game player of the century.
What is the situation there at present with him? Obviously, he, I guess, didn't want to be named as a substitute. Then maybe there were some turf issues in that last game. That was what Alexi Lalas implied a little bit. I'm curious what your thoughts are heading into the playoffs.
Well, heading into the game against Toronto that he didn't play, reports were that he had worked his tail off in practice all week to be fit. And then he was originally told he was going to start, and then he was told that he was not going to start, at which point he said, don't even put me in the 18, which is not what you want to hear, but
not
so
so
it
much,
goes.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. The following week, which was last week, ahead of decision day, he had a back injury. So he didn't train at all. And of course, we know he doesn't play on turf. So, so I guess it shouldn't be a surprise that he didn't even travel and hasn't played at all. And then now early reports this week are that his back injury is still bad, so he can't train, but he's probably going to be available anyway. Which leads me to believe that Mr. Drogba wants to make a point, which is I don't even have to train to go out there on this field for 25 minutes and kick the hell out of every defender in my path.
Yeah.
Given that it is actually Didier Drogba, my money's on him. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to see how that plays out. My personal opinion of the man is very high. Anyone who has worked as much with, charities and literally stopping a civil war as he has. Yeah. He's made of some really great stuff. And I just think that he is going to not want to go out as the guy who refused to play for his team. So that is obviously the big story for Thursday night. And then a little less big is Seattle versus Sporting KC, which is Ladero, who has been fantastic. It's Ladero and Morris really versus Feilhaber and Dom Dwyer. And Feilhaber over his last 11 games has been great. He has 2 goals and 9 assists. So it looks like the Benny of last year, who was an MVP candidate.
You mentioned like the big name players for Sporting KC. One player you didn't mention is Matt Beasler, who I guess has fallen out of favor a little bit. I know Jurgen Klinsmann took some shots at Sporting KC in that last round of games. So can you update people on what's going on with Matt Beasler?
It looks now like he's back in the lineup. From what I understand, he and Vermees have always had a little bit of a rocky relationship. Vermees maybe thinks he's a little bit soft, and Beasler, to my eye, is not soft. But the coach sees what he sees. Mm-hmm. I think he's back in the lineup. I think he showed last weekend what he's all about, and I expect that the Kansas City defense will continue to be better with him on the field. Now, whether that's good enough to go up to Seattle and get a result, I have my doubts. But they at least got a shot.
So like you mentioned, Portland last season came in hot into the playoffs, made their way through the playoffs, stayed hot, won the title. Is that kind of a common thing in your opinion in Major League Soccer? Is it about getting hot at the right time, or with the kind of sheer duration of the playoffs, it's like a month and a half at this point? Is it possible to, if you are that team that's riding momentum, to stay on fire for that long?
It certainly can be. I think that's what Portland did. Mm-hmm. But in 2014, it was the Galaxy who had something like 67 points, and they were I think they were the second best team in the regular season, and one of the best attacking teams all time. A lot of people made a lot of New England's run that year because they made the final in 2014. But that wasn't just we got hot in the last 4 games or even 3 games of the regular season. They got hot at the end of July, the Revs did in 2014, and they kept that going all the way to MLS Cup before losing at the Galaxy. 2013, it was 2 of the best teams in the league in Sporting and RSL. 2012, a little less of that with LA and Houston. It was more of like veteran know-how stuff. So I don't think there's any one. I don't think there's any one path. I do think home field matters. I think having more than one guy who can get you big goals matters, and probably having a hot goalkeeper matters as well.
So of those teams that are in like this, I'm going to call it like the knockout round, who would you say is kind of the most well suited to make a deeper run into the playoffs?
I think it's Toronto FC. Mm-hmm. They have this, by the numbers, they have the second best defense in the league this year. Now I think it's a little misleading because it hasn't been so good lately, but it's still pretty good. I think they have a very, very good goalkeeper in Clint Irwin, who has, I think, a good personality as well. The highs aren't too high and the lows aren't too low. More important, they have three of the best players in the league in their three DPs. Mm-hmm. And that's if
kind
you're putting
kind of helpful.
Yeah. If you're putting Sebastian Giovinco and this version of Josie Altidore on the field together, you're probably going to create a little bit of danger. Yep. And then, by the way, you have international caliber players behind them like Jonathan Osorio and Armando Cooper and Will Johnson, if Jay Chapman gets healthy again. So they have a bunch of solutions. Justin Morrow on the overlap. He's been fantastic this year. I like this TFC team a lot, but I do need to take a wait and see at least 45 minutes before I jump completely on the bandwagon. I want to see what they do to Philly defensively.
That's fair. So if TFC were to make a deep run to the playoffs, it would have to be at the expense of one of the New York teams. First off, I wanted to ask you, so in terms of like the overall Red Bull global organization, so you've got USL champions, you've got RB Leipzig, doing things in the Bundesliga in the Champions League spots. So could this be the year of the Red Bull? Could New York finally make that deep run, maybe lift some silverware? Or do you think it's another year of frustration?
I mean, look, there are legitimately, I think, 8 teams that can win MLS Cup. Mm-hmm. So the odds are against all of them. Are the Red Bulls a little bit better than maybe some of the others in the mix? I absolutely think so. But it's still a crapshoot. If BWP's last second header, or was it a Bong's last second header, doesn't hit the post last year, it's a different story, right?
I forgot about that completely.
Yeah. So it's you need luck, you need to be good, and you need to be prepared. Mm-hmm. I know that the Red Bulls have those. They will have those last two spoken for, but it's hard to go 3 for 3.
A couple more of those top seed teams. In terms of FC Dallas, I've enjoyed the videos doing the round of Mauro Diaz celebrating with champagne at his house. Unfortunately, for those unaware, the reason why he's at his house is because he's got that torn ACL. So what do you make of their prospects without a Mauro Diaz heading into the playoffs?
Not as good.
Yeah. That's your expert opinion?
Yeah, I think they would have been, I think, clear favorites had Mauro Diaz been healthy, but obviously he's not, and that's a bummer because he's a beautiful player to watch play. Mm-hmm. They are still a more multifaceted team than they have been in years past, because remember, Diaz missed huge chunks of the 2014 and 2015 seasons, and they had to compensate. And their only way of compensating back then was to sit deep, defend, and counter. Mm-hmm. And they still have that. That's what they did against the Galaxy this past weekend, and it was enough for a draw, which, by the way, scoreless draw on the road, totally fine result in the playoffs.
Yep.
But they do have Mauro Rosales. Now, he can't replicate what Diaz does, but he can only, kind of approximate it. But that's still pretty good. And we saw a little bit of that midweek last week against Suchi Tepeques in the CONCACAF Champions League, a 5-2 result in Guatemala that got Dallas into the quarterfinals. Mauro Rosales can still ball a little bit. So I think you'll see Oscar Pareja toggle between the 4-4-2 really rope-a-dope style, and maybe a more, I hate to use the buzzword, but a more proactive 4-2-3-1 that gets Rosales into positions where he could be a real creator.
Is 4-2-3-1 the buzzword now? Is that where we are with it?
Well, I was saying proactive being the buzzword.
Oh, the buzzword. Okay, I gotcha. I'm just so used to 4-2-3-1 as like a bad word nowadays, or I guess a bad phrase. So
Is
that makes
it?
sense. I don't know. I feel like it's what every team plays. So or like what every kind of standard team plays. So you get used to it a little bit, and it becomes like, oh yeah, we're gonna play a 4-2-3-1. Like that kind of quickly default into 4-5-1. I feel like and can get a little defensive.
It definitely can, and I think there's more of a danger of that with Rosales in there as the number 10 than there was with Diaz. But when that formation is played well, it can still be pretty devastating, just in terms of transitioning from defense to attack.
So we like to do on the show, we like to do like specific predictions. We do kind of season previews, and in doing both of those for Major League Soccer, I think Daryl and I were very down on Colorado at the start of the season. Obviously, we were a little bit wrong since they were challenging for the Supporter Shield on the final day. So are we just idiots, or was there like a lot going on behind the scenes with Colorado heading into the season and then kind of throughout the season to keep them in this position?
But why can't it be both?
I mean, it probably is. I won't speak for Daryl. I'll speak for myself and say it definitely is.
Look, everybody was wrong about Colorado, except for the people in the Colorado locker room. And you got to give them a lot of credit for building that defense, and paying the big money for Tim Howard that they paid, which really did seem to be the right move in terms of keeping the team's attitude real fine-tuned, and selling a bunch more tickets and a lot more sponsorship money. So they got that one right on and off the field. They got scrap heap additions like Sam Cronin and Michael Azira and Eric Miller. Absolutely correct. They showed faith, Pablo Mastroeni. They showed faith in Pablo Mastroeni first and foremost, and then he showed faith in the young defenders like Schuberg and Watts and Miller, as I said. So you take one box after another. They developed a couple of good young attacking players in Hairston and Baji, and then gave them license to actually attack. And it was Hairston who had the assist the other day. So it was one thing after another they did right, and that's how you become a team that. Look, I don't think they're a great team. But you don't have to be a great team to finish at or near the top in MLS. You just have to be a tough out. Week after week after week. You have to be a tough out. And that's exactly what the Rapids are. And they're not going to go lightly in these playoffs.
I know we got to get you going here in a second, Matt, but I just got a couple more questions if that's okay.
Sure thing.
I wanted to ask, since I think they're the only playoff team we haven't mentioned yet, NYCFC and Patrick Vieira. So I know we had you on the show talking about Patrick Vieira in the past. What have you made of what he's done with this NYCFC team?
Look, he's an ideologue. He knows exactly how he wants to play, and he is going to have his team play that way, come hell or high water. And I love him for it, because I think look, pragmatism is a uniquely American school of philosophy, and we have a lot of pragmatic coaches in this league, and we need more guys who aren't pragmatic, guys who are saying no, we have this is our style, and you see it in their numbers of just passes attempted and completed in their own defensive third. It is significantly higher than anybody in the league, and it's because they want to draw the defense toward them, and that goes against the orthodoxy in the modern game, where everything is you get the ball out of your attacking third or out of your defensive third and into the attacking third, and you just cut down the amount of space between yourself and the goal. Because that is the quickest way, and that's the way the Red Bulls play. That's the way Sporting KC play, and those coaches are ideologues as well, and I love them for that. It's just Vieira has flipped on the field where risk and reward are sort of intertwined, and it's paid off in a big way. I think they are the most fun team in the league to watch this year. I think he's done a great job developing young players like Jack Harrison, Tommy McNamara, Kyrie Shelton, Ronald Matarrita, RJ Allen. The list goes on. And I think that it says a lot about his tactical chops, just what he did this past weekend. Because they'd played Columbus twice and given up a ton of goals and a ton of chances. And Columbus did it the same way against them each time. It was by bringing bringing Justin Miram inside. So Columbus were effectively playing a 3-5-2 with two number 10s. Vieira said, okay, I know I'm going to expect that. So he switched his lineup to a 3-4-3 that actually kind of played like a 5-4-1 for the first hour in order to prevent those central overloads. And then when Columbus actually did tie it up and he saw the score of the Toronto game and he said, I need to go for it, because if I don't win, I'm going to have to play a knockout round game with these 60-year-old midfielders of mine. He switched back to the 4-3-3, made a couple of good moves, and turned over the last 20 minutes of the game, turned a 1-1 draw into a 4-1 win. Like that's the guy. The guy's not going to be in MLS long. He will be coaching in England or maybe France, I think, within the next couple of years, because he seems to have a real gift.
All right. So there we go. We've gone from a kind of sad start to optimistic, happy conclusion. And my phone going off as well. But final question for you, Matt, before I get you going. So we had Alexi on the pod yesterday. He mentioned that media can vote for MVP. So not to put you on the spot, but are you a voter? And if so, can we also have your social security number?
Yes and no. I am a voter, and I will tell you this. I voted for Sebastian Giovinco for MVP.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Can't argue with 17 goals and 15 assists. I know he missed a bit of time, but he's been the best and the most valuable.
I was just wondering if you were going to maybe throw a wrench in there by throwing out Nico Lodeiro, but you've gone Giovinco, and that's respectable. So we'll leave it at that.
Thank you for deeming it to be respectful.
Of course, my pleasure. Since we've previously established that I'm an idiot, you're welcome. I'm sure it means a lot. But Matt, thanks so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
My genuine pleasure. Let's do it again soon.
Sounds good. Enjoy your lack of sleep for the next couple of weeks, and hopefully it all works out well.
Yeah, keep my fingers crossed. Take care, Taylor.
Thanks, Matt. So that was Matt Doyle. You can find all of his work over at MLSsoccer.com, and you can find him on Twitter at MLS Analyst. He is worth following because he's, number one, quite funny, number two, quite informed, and number three, quite smart. As you could hear in that interview, basically every time I interview Matt, I end up having like 8 million questions that I still want to ask. But, I also feel like he probably has other things to do in his life than sit on Skype and answer all my questions. So I appreciate the time that he does take to do that. This was going to be the only interview of the show, but we actually have an emergency hot take, quick take from Daryl Grove regarding the situation over at Wolverhampton. But first, a word from a sponsor. Today's sponsor is Fucci. You've heard us talk about it. You've seen us play the game if you've watched those videos on YouTube. They're the makers of the specially engineered rebounder that combines soccer and squash to create a unique playing experience. We actually filmed a new video of us playing. I say playing in quotes because I think Daryl and I were the first two eliminated, but we did round Fucci, which is basically where everyone on our team was playing. We had about, 10 people going at one time. You play down, basically people get eliminated until you have 2 left, and then they play a heads-up battle. It was a good time. It was definitely a good time. We played under the lights in the backyard at our team party, and we learned some things about round Fucci, which is that number 1, it's hard, and that number 2, serving is key. I think that video will be up later this week, maybe this weekend, depending on Daryl's schedule. But in the meantime, TSS listeners can get 15% off their Fucci order, by using the promo code TOTALSOCCER, all one word, all lowercase, at checkout. That's TOTALSOCCER, all one word, all lowercase, at Fucci. That's FUTCHI.com. Oh, and one final piece of advice about playing Fucci at night, whether it be round Fucci or standard Fucci battle: don't play with a black ball. That tends to cause problems very quickly. White balls, brightly colored balls, when playing at night, generally the way to go. Now then, it's been almost 2 days, I think, since I last spoke with Daryl Grove, which is entirely too long for us. So I went ahead and got him on the line. Hello, Daryl.
Hello.
How you doing, buddy?
Hello. Good. turns out you're the Taylor Twellman of the West Midlands.
Yeah, so for View Behind the Curtain, had just finished recording my interview with Matt Doyle, logged onto Twitter as the show was converting to MP3 format, and saw a bunch of tweets about Walter Zenga and people needing Daryl's response. Walter Zenga has been sacked as the manager of Wolverhampton. Daryl Grove is on the line from England. Hello, Daryl.
Hello, I am now. So yeah, I got my news from Taylor Rockwell, despite being, 10 miles from where this presumably happened. I was getting some catch-up sleep to deal with jet lag. And now I found out that Walter Zenga's been fired, right? So I guess you're looking for my response, right?
Well, first of all, the most important thing is that you get on the food schedule. So once you're on the meal schedule, that jet lag dissipates. So that's the number one thing.
That will be taken care of in about 20 minutes. And
then I think the second most important thing is that you get on the booze schedule as well. You have to get on the appropriate, drinking schedule. So make sure you do that too.
That will be taken care of in 19 minutes.
Okay, cool. But yes, first, let's talk Wolverhampton.
So I am both surprised and not surprised, and a little confused. It may be the sleep deprivation.
Surprised, not surprised, and confused. Got it.
Yeah, probably a lot like Walter Zenga right now. So it's October 25th, right, which is very early to be firing a manager who only got hired not long before the season started, right? Normally, a new coach coming in just before the season with a bunch of new players and a new ownership, you would think they'd give him until at least, say, January, half a season, because it's not like this is the coach who came with the club, right? Right. The ownership group didn't inherit this guy and then just half give him a chance, sort of like Swansea did with Gideon. This was their guy. They chose this guy deliberately.
They did. They chose him deliberately given what was available at the time. And it seems like maybe very quickly they've realized this isn't going to fit with what we want to do. We're trying to bring in marquee names. Maybe even that they're trying to bring it to get rid of him early to get themselves set up to be able to buy in January and make a stronger run.
I agree. So, right now they're 18th in the table, right? So that's obviously the big problem. After all this investment and buying all these Benfica B players, Wolves are surprised to find themselves 18th in the table. And I think you said marquee name. I feel like that might have been the problem with Walter Zenga to begin with, is that he was a flashy, famous name. So it was kind of like a statement of look who we've got. Not this boring Kenny Jackett guy. We've got this famous old Italian goalkeeper. Yeah. But then if you look back at his record, it's always a season or a season and a half gone, season and a half gone, or even sooner. So this is actually, in terms of Walter Zenga's track record, this is sort of par for the course. This is his rhythm.
So there we go.
In a blaze of publicity and then get gone.
There's been a lot of conversations about rhythm on the Total Soccer Show lately. But my question for you, my question for you then, as a Wolverhampton fan, is is that a bad thing though? Because that does point to new ownership, managerial turnover. It does point to a club that maybe doesn't necessarily have a plan in place. And so can that be a little bit disconcerting as a fan?
Absolutely. Do you remember when this takeover happened, right? This was before they fired Kenny Jackett, hired Walter Zenga. I said I was concerned that the sort of wasn't a proper long-term plan. There was just this idea that we're going to sign all these George Mendes adjacent players. And there wasn't really, it wasn't we definitely need this type of right winger, so let's get this guy. It was more just he's available, he's Portuguese, he's connected through our agent, let's get him. And I feel like Walter Zenga is part of that same pattern of just grabbing whatever seems like it might work and then hoping it all somehow works out. When in reality, when you sign, I think they signed 14 players in the summer. You actually need a miracle worker of a coach to mold all that into a proper team. You don't need just another person that you've grabbed randomly to try and mold that into a team.
I don't know. If you've grabbed everything randomly, then grabbing one more thing randomly seems like it could balance out. But I guess in this situation, it didn't. So that does leave us with the question of who comes in. And right now there is the interim manager. The assistant manager, I believe, has gone with Zenga. So this does to me immediately speak to the idea that they do have a candidate in mind, because you don't fire, as you said, a manager this early unless maybe you have some sort of solution in place, and I think they might, and I think you can guess who it is.
Who do you? Is it? The rumor I've seen or the photo I've seen when I'm looking at stories is Big Sam Allardyce.
Oh, I haven't even seen that, but that was the immediate thought I had: is they're going to hire Big Sam? Yeah.
He's a local gentleman.
He's a local gentleman.
His reputation right now is not the highest, right?
This is true. which is why maybe he would take a championship job, especially since, other relatively big names are taking championship jobs nowadays. So maybe he comes in, maybe he does accept that money, and then Big Sam is in the championship with your Dudley club, Daryl. Not really your Dudley club. I just wanted to get into the fact that you're both from Dudley.
Yeah, how dare you? How dare you? If you look at the track record of the managers being linked with Wolves, Sam Allardyce is head and shoulders above everybody else, right? I mean, we agreed that he was he had the resume to be the England manager. So this would be a get for Wolves in terms of resume.
This is true,
but it's kind of toxic right now after everything that happened with the how to get around third-party ownership rules and all that.
Yeah, and then I mean, even if you wanted to take it to the full extent, there are also those allegations that he was kind of like had inappropriate connections to agents, that he was trying to get certain players to sign with his agent. And if you already have the George Mendes connections at Wolverhampton, maybe you don't need more like agents having their say in the comings and goings and the daily dealings of a club.
Right, but then if you look at it from the other side, if you just don't take the moral or ethical considerations in, and you've got this absolute mess of players right now, which is what I've seen. I haven't seen all Wolves games this year because it's been hard to find on TV, but it really has been signed too many players, and then nothing's been established, and then we keep switching around who's starting where, and it's been really incoherent. So of all the managers listed, Sam Allardyce is the one I would have the most faith in to come in and be like, all right, this is how we're doing it. This is the plan, and finally sort of mold that into something that can win some games in the Championship. And also, Wolves has a weird track record of being the sort of the place that catches disgraced England managers. Graham Taylor went there not long after losing the England job, and Glenn Hoddle also managed at Wolves after losing the England job. So it would sort of fit the pattern for Wolves.
So that's the reputation you want? Come to us, disgraced former England managers. We'll make you whole again.
Well, and none of them really had huge success at Wolves, but I can see why it's tempting for them, because Wolves is this historic team that if you can be the guy that turns them around and makes them successful again, then you really would sort of wash your reputation clean. Although it's a little different with Sam Allardyce because everybody else's reputation was actually football related and not secret camera related.
Yeah, there's that. I also like that Richmond is accommodating us in this emergency segment of the show by just sending emergency vehicles by every 10 seconds, it seems. Probably not great. Probably not great news.
But they're all probably headed this way.
So yeah, exactly. So we've had a couple different questions on Twitter, Daryl Grove, and we just need you to confirm.
Oh yeah.
Have you gone home for family reasons or have you gone home for career reasons? Are you a Wolverhampton job? I mean, that's
you might think that I couldn't possibly comment.
It's a lot of silence I'm hearing on that other end. But yeah,
I can check with my lawyer.
So, is there any chance this makes you go to a game now? I know your schedule's already busy, but do you think you'll try to squeeze one in if Big Sam gets appointed?
Unfortunately, I can't. So the first game or the next game will be away to Blackburn, which obviously would be interesting because Big Sam used to be at Blackburn. Right. And then after that, they're at home to Derby, but that's the day I fly home. So unless the plane flies over the stadium and I get a glimpse down, I won't be able to see them play.
A true fan would reschedule that flight so they could stay. But speaking as a person who would like his podcast, his common law podcast partner back, you can come on back whenever you want, buddy. So I know you got to.
Well, from what I've heard so far, you're doing a great job with that.
The one show that you have heard, and then the one that I've recorded.
Yeah,
I'll take it. But I do want to ask before you get going. So overall, though, are you pleased that Zenga has been sacked, and are you excited to see what comes, or are you still sort of nervous about the whole situation?
So I never really liked him as the coach because I didn't see like a clear philosophy or a clear idea of what he was doing. But I think the problem's bigger than just Zenga. I think the way that he was hired and then fired speaks to the fact that the new ownership group doesn't really have a plan. And even though I think Big Sam might be the man to sort of get this group into shape, sort of. I don't think that doesn't necessarily indicate that there's a larger plan in place. So I'm mostly worried about the direction of the club as I was when this took over. I mean, we said we'll check in and see what happens, right? Because I thought maybe I was a little too down on Fosun International, the ownership group. And my worst fears are sort of coming true here, that we're one of those clubs that has a rich owner and a sort of a messy relationship with any idea of what to do.
Well, I assume that's why you're there. You could right the ship, but more importantly, you can go eat and drink now. So, Daryl Grove, thank you for taking the time on your vacation to give us your immediate quick take thoughts on the Wolverhampton situation.
You're welcome. My week off didn't last very long, did it?
It really didn't. It really didn't.
Tuesday.
I mean, honestly, I like couched this as we want to get your thoughts. Really, I personally just wanted to make sure you weren't actually planning to leave us for Wolverhampton. So it's good to know that you're planning to come back to TSS.
I definitely plan to come back. I look forward to seeing you again.
That's good. All right. Well, Mr. Grove, enjoy the rest of your vacation, and thank you for taking the time.
All right. Thank you, Taylor.